Zack Kopplin is joining us again. He's a science education activist working on a campaign for evidence-based science to be taught in science class and a reinvestment in science funding. Zack, it's great to talk to you as always. You know, we outlined 10 or 12 things that are being taught in some Louisiana schools a couple of weeks ago, including that dinosaurs lived at the same time as humans, and so many other things on that long list that you're obviously very familiar with. You're now looking at what's happening in a public Texas charter, kind of like a super network. So explain what this is and what's being taught there.
Hey, David, thanks for having me on again. And recently I've been researching the Responsive Education Solutions Charter Network in Texas. It's the largest charter program in Texas with 65 schools, 17,000 students, and it receives $82 million yearly from the public. And it's teaching things like the fossil record is sketchy, that leading scientists doubt the mechanisms of evolution and the age of the earth, and that supernatural creation is just as valid of a way to explain the diversity of life on Earth as evolution. And this is not science. It doesn't belong in a publicly funded science classroom. And they also have terrible history, too. They're teaching things like the samurai were responsible for Japan's involvement in World War II. Problem is the samurai were disbanded good roughly 70 years before World War II.
Well, the fossil one is interesting because it really gets us into what would be called pseudoscience, or taking the smallest element of truth and turning it into something it's not. Because yes, factually speaking, statistically, a very small portion of what was around when fossils come from do we now have as fossil evidence. That's very true. We make assumptions from a very small number of fossils about a lot of organisms. However, to take that and to say that fossils are sketchy and therefore this is an opportunity to interject, whether it's creationism or something else, that's where it gets very dangerous, because you take the slightest sliver of truth and make it into something it's not.
Yeah, and they also say things like there are no transitional fossils, which is just such a basic misunderstanding. Because it's a fundamental misunderstanding about evolution, which is continually happening. Every fossil is transitional because everything continues to change. So to say there's no transitional fossils totally misses the point. But it's a way to undermine evolution. Again, once they've undermined evolution, they can lead students towards thinking that creationism is a legitimate option.
So let's explore a little bit the kind of a public funding aspect of this, because if you have the conversation with those who want to teach creationism about the merits of creationism, you're probably not going to get anywhere at all. So it may be more important to focus on what is the legality of, in science class, not in religion class, teaching ideas that stem from sacred texts. So what's the legal status right now of that? Public funding here, teaching science based on the Bible.
Teaching creationism is totally unconstitutional. Same with intelligent design creationism, but the Supreme Court has ruled that creationism, in the case Edwards versus Aguilar from my home state, Louisiana, that creationism is unconstitutional. In 2005, a federal district court in Dover, Pennsylvania followed up with the Dover versus Kitzmiller case, where they ruled intelligent design is still creationism and equally unconstitutional. So you can't teach that in a public school science class. The problem is we have legislation like in Louisiana, we have the Louisiana Science Education Act. In Texas, we have science curriculum standards that allow for both sides to be taught, for evolution to be critiqued. And that's sort of the way they sneak it in, is they say, we're just critiquing evolution. The problem is there's no real scientific critique of evolution. It's all the science is the science, and all the evidence backs evolution. You can't challenge it.
And I would even add to that, Zack, I would even say, if you want to challenge areas of evolution that maybe are not fully fleshed out at this point, or where there may be gaps in the theory, and you want to do it strictly from a scientific basis, if you can do that, I don't think anyone has any kind of problem with that. The issue is the bringing in
challenged evolution would be fine in a science class. There's just no legitimate challenges.
So where does this stand then? Because there is this, as you said, if you can kind of say the criticism, you're allowed to challenge evolution at its merits. If it happens to talk about creationism or intelligent design, you're getting into kind of a legal gray area. It's not necessarily the teaching of intelligent design, but it may be intelligent design creeping in as a criticism. What will happen legally with this?
So there's one point to also make on this, which is scientists challenge evolution every day, and the reason it's still a scientific theory is because it survived all those challenges. It's been challenged continually for 150 years. It's one of the strongest theories out there, and so there's no legitimate there you can't bring like creationism isn't a scientific alternative, and just sort of clearly establish that. And on where the responsive education solution stands, right now, the Texas Education Agency is investigating. I am currently skeptical that their investigation has any real meaning to it because first they said that responsive ed the big investigation is coming internally from responsive ed. The problem is first allowing a creationist network, which is fully creationist, where their members of their top staff have said they view charters as a way to sneak religion into public schools. That's also part of this. Responsive ed is based off the Accelerated Christian Education Network, uses a very similar curriculum founded by members of the network, and is sort of meant to promote their religious beliefs. They've sort of allowed that to slip out, and so to allow them to do the investigation themselves is problematic because they're going to come back and say, well, oh, everything's legal, and they already have sort of done that. They responded to my article publicly where they admitted everything. They agreed that everything I published was true. They claim that it's all legitimate under under Texas science standards, and that they're just teaching both sides like they're required to, and that it's perfectly okay to talk about creationism the way they're doing.
And that is
so,
actually a problem, right? Which is the
yeah.
changing standards specifically in Texas, and also we know about the rewriting of so many of the books that are used. So even though you and I can kind of realize the absurdity of what they're saying, they may actually have some backing from the changes Texas has made.
Well, yes and no. So the thing, they have some protection because of the standards in Texas, but on a fundamental level, those standards are not a legitimate protection. You cannot, Texas science standards do not trump the U.S. Constitution. So when they're violating the First Amendment, it doesn't matter what Texas science standards say. They still cannot do it. And that's the problem they don't understand. And so they've admitted everything publicly and have basically said it doesn't matter. We're still going to keep teaching it, and we're proud to keep teaching this. And then the Texas Education Agency informed me that while they're looking at the curriculum, at the time they did not say anything that violates the law. So it's
I think that's giving us quite a preview into the way they're going to ultimately side on this. Yeah,
which means that the easy option would be for the Texas Education Agency to remove the schools, to make sure they cannot use this curriculum, to make sure that Texas schools are teaching science. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. So this looks like it's going to come down to a court case eventually. I mean, I don't have standing to file. All I could do is really write about this. But I've already heard from some teachers at Responsive Ed, not on the record, but they want to remain anonymous, but they told me that what I exposed was only the tip of the iceberg, and there's tons of problems in these schools. And I'm imagining that either a parent or a teacher at some point in the near future might want to launch a legal suit.
And parents whose children are being taught would have standing, correct?
Yes, they would a parent whose children has been taught creationism, any parent in Texas at a responsive ed school could sue the program because their rights have been violated. And I would not be surprised to see that happen in the near future. If Texas always could nip this in the bud. The Texas Education Agency could shut down the program, get rid of this curriculum, make sure that real science is being taught. And I'm hoping they do that because the investigation is not over. There's nothing officially out about this, but I'm not hopeful that they'll do the right thing.
All right, science in science class. I know it's crazy in many parts of this country. We've been speaking with Zack Kopplin. He's a science education activist. He's working on a campaign for evidence-based science to be taught in science class. Keep up the great work, Zack, and we'll have you back anytime.
All right. Thank you so much for having me on.